So, good morning. As usual, my name is Aneesh de Vos. I am in the corner of the sitting room, but I've changed it round a bit. I'm hoping that I don't get the light of some ancestral being going up there today. It seems that Tom Bell, who's with us today, has got that light. And as ever, my partner in crime, because you did say that you had got like a prison sense coming through, didn't you, David, with your light last week, through the blinds. It is the ponderful, and I'm still sticking with that word, David. Ponderful. I think it's ponderous, but I just like ponderful now. David.
Ponderful's good, yeah.
It is good. It's a good word. So enough of myself and David. We are incredibly privileged today, and as usual, I'm also very, very excited because I generally am. And I think David's excited today to introduce to you Tom Bell. So Tom Bell is one of these guys that has got qualifications down the road and then some to support him in his work in both the private and public sectors and what we consider the third sector. He works as a project manager and a leadership development consultant. He is also an author and runs an organization called Honesty and Integrity in Public Services, and you will be able to access that from the information below this video in the resources. Today, Tom is here to talk to us about a really important part of the third sector. He is part of an organization called Eden Carers. He is definitely a systems thinker, and he considers that nothing happens in isolation. So, Tom, I'm going to kind of flick over to you now and say, tell us, Eden Carers, what is it that you do, and why is it that you as a systems thinker considers that nothing happens in isolation? Not a big question, you know, take your time.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, how long have you got?
I think we said 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay, where to begin? Gosh, where to begin? So, I remember when I used to work for Carlsberg many moons ago, and I was that sort of, you know, annoyingly enthusiastic rep, you know, and I went to see a customer, long-standing customer of Carlsberg's, who very profitable outlet for the organisation, and being greeted by the landlord of the premises, you know, whose wife had run off with the drayman that morning. Quite. And I remember thinking to myself, I never read anything in Johnson and Scholes about how to deal with this situation, you know. Nobody ever gives you that kind of insight, and you know, it was just, I was just completely, you know, I mean, needless to say, we lost the account, and that was kind of the end of that. But it was, I just thought to myself, I thought, wow, isn't that amazing that this thing has happened? And I appreciate it might be a slightly extreme example, but this thing has happened that nobody in a strategy textbook would ever foresee or account for or accommodate or plan for or help you prepare for as a salesperson or a company representative. And it's at moments like that where you kind of realize that life is the bit that happens, isn't it, in between the lines and the paragraphs of strategies. It's the messy bit that nobody kind of gets. That's the reality of it. And strategies are lovely. And having been around the NHS in another life for a few years, and having been around the public sector for many years, when the regional development agencies were a thing, that's when they used to have lots of public money back in the day. Absolutely. You see that the sort of, you know, we've had enough strategies published to pave the M6, and none of them have come to anything. It's just words and words and words, and nobody ever looks back on a strategy and says, was that a success, do they? But they're always inventing new ones, and it's as if the need for the strategy, the need for the plan, the need for certainty, but none of them accommodate the real life, real situations. And life is messy. And so I started getting interested in this thing that we call systems thinking, which when I started getting interested in, it was a sort of a very grand thing, you know, and you'd say to people, I'm reading a book on systems thinking. And it was like, oh, who do you think you are, you know? But it's actually really logical, isn't it? It's just recognizing that everything influences everything else, that nothing happens in isolation, that everything really is connected. And I don't mean that in some sort of Zen, you know, way where, you know, if there's a butterfly flapping its wings, you know, somewhere over Malaysia, that, you know, we'll all get tsunamied or something. It's just that what's happening to us right now is the result of decisions that either we or other people made previously. You know, we kind of are where we, and it drives me nuts when people use that phrase, we are where we are. It's quite correct to say we are where we are, but actually what people use the phrase to excuse is, let's not look backwards. Let's not look at how we got here. Let's just say we are where we are. And you know, this tyranny of positivity that we live under, where we're then just supposed to go, right, okay, what does the future look like? It never allows us to look back and say, how did we get to this point? Because if we don't understand how we got to this point, then we're just going to repeat that as we go forward, yeah. So to cut a long story short, I started to, I've lived in Penrith now for, gosh, next year it will be 50 years. So I'll be getting my passport stamped and I'll be getting a place at the local cemetery and it'll all be good. But a few years ago, once I started to get a reputation as a sort of semi-reasonable individual, I was asked to become a school governor. And I don't know how that happened because I don't have any children, but they were obviously short of people to get involved. I was told a story at the time, actually, that they needed somebody on the board of governors to keep there was a sort of dirty old man who was attending the meetings who kept, you know, touching other people, long story. And they said they needed somebody there to keep an eye on him. So so I got involved in that, and that's fine. And then I quite enjoyed it, did a good job. And I spent 8 years as a school governor at 2 different schools. And I think once people in a small community like Penrith find out that you are willing to do something, that you have a little bit of sense of civic, let's call it civic responsibility, that you want to give a little bit back, that you then get asked to do other things. And if you've been good at that, then you'll get asked to do this. And so I was then asked by someone who had also been a governor at the same school if I wanted to become a trustee of this thing called Eden Carers, yeah. Right. So I became a trustee a few years ago, and then I fell into that classic trap of turning up at a meeting, which everyone else had obviously prepared for, but which I was nominated as chair. And it was kind of like, you know, I didn't step back quickly enough, you know. And so I ended up with a chair's hat a couple of years ago. And it is, you're always conscious in roles like that you've got this imposter syndrome going on.
Oh, you know, I know that one. Do you know that one, David?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Carry on. We're all imposters.
Yeah, you know, and so you try to add value where you can, but I guess I wouldn't call myself a conventional management thinker stroke business thinker, in the sense that I remember passing my MBA years ago and being so full of myself, thinking I would now know the answers to everything. And it becomes clear after a few years that, you know, as I say, once you've got those experiences where you realise that life is what happens in between the lines of the strategies, you know, I call my MBA now Master of Bugger All. And I kind of think it's just the price of entry into the game, really, isn't it? But all it really teaches you is how little you know. Yeah. And so that's fine. But I think the most value that I've gained has come from other courses, other books, things that you wouldn't traditionally find on a business curriculum. Yeah. Yes. And I guess I justify that in my own head by asking the simple question: does the world need more of the same? You know, if all this stuff, if these libraries full of textbooks, if Johnson and Scholes do have it right, then actually, why is it so wrong? Yeah. You know, we clearly need to be thinking of other things, don't we? And, you know, I won't get into the areas of sustainability and other such things. That's probably for another topic for another time. But you asked about Eden Carers, and I've been blethering on a bit about this and that. So
I love your blethering, actually. Carry on with your blethering. We're enjoying it, aren't we, David? And I like your Masters of Bugger All. Love it.
Yeah. You know, it does feel as if it kind of what it is. yeah, it should be labelled that, really, shouldn't it? You know,
and it is a passport, isn't it? It is a passport to have that acceptance, to say, yes, I can do my job.
Yeah, quite. You know, I'm not never really sure what job that would be, but I think you're right. It is. It's just a passport, isn't it? Just a ticket, to ticket into the game, and then you kind of do what you want with it from there. I guess it's a bit like a driving license, isn't it? You don't really learn.
Yeah.
Got my driving license now. I'm actually going to learn how to drive. It's kind of like
totally that. Agree on that. Totally.
So Eden Carers. So I feel very privileged actually, because I've got a good group of trustees and a fabulous chief executive who work there, who seem to think I'm doing a reasonable job. If they ever see this, I'll doubtless find out whether or not.
Yeah, don't show it.
Yeah. And for me, it's been interesting because one of the bits of my life, a period I have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed, was spending 10 years in an organisation called Business Link. Right. And Business Link, for those of you with long memories, was a government-funded organisation that originally Michael Heseltine set up. So something the Tories did that actually worked, I think. Yeah. And it was all about. It came about in the wake of the riots, actually. Toxteth and other such things, where we were sort of in this urban decay, and companies were offshoring and companies were leaving the UK, and lots of things were going on, and unemployment was going through the roof. And the Tories, I think, thought that the recipe for this would be to develop a culture of enterprise, whatever that might look like. So the Business Links were set up to help people set up businesses, new ventures, all that stuff. Great. And I thoroughly enjoyed doing that because having lived in Cumbria, as I say, all my adult life, opportunities around here are quite thin on the ground.
Yeah.
And so the idea of helping people achieve their ambitions in the county that I love was, for me, that was brilliant. That was great. I thought it was a really fulfilling role. So I spent 10 years advising businesses. And also, I for my sins, I'm a chartered marketer. It's not really something I boast about because I kind of think I got into marketing very naively, thinking that marketing was about finding out what people wanted and then designing products and services around that. The problem is once you get into it, too many people that call themselves marketers actually just want to flog what they've got, regardless of whether or not it fits. But I think true marketing is probably, it's got a bad name and maybe it shouldn't have.
David, I know you have some views on that.
Marketing, yeah. Having been one myself also, yeah, I have some very strong views.
Yeah. And I completely concur with people that think the role of public relations is a dark art. I'm not a fan of that at all. But one of the good things that comes out of marketing is, and there are, there's good in everything, isn't it? I guess if you look closely enough, maybe, is that it's that bit about market research, which was the bit that floated my boat, was about talking to people. What is it they want? What works for them? What do they need? How can you help them, etc., etc. And because those are universal principles, you can apply those in terms of engagement in community services or the public sector or the third sector, never mind just the private sector. But I think the wombat model of marketing, which is the waste of money, balloons and t-shirts theory, is that's given it a bad name, hasn't it?
Well, I've not heard of it until then, and I quite like it.
Yeah, let's paint the turd and sell it. It doesn't really, that doesn't float my boat. But hey, I guess it's good to have experience of these things to know about them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So you become an informed critic from the inside, a critical friend, if you like, from the inside.
Yeah.
And I do have some healthy debates with colleagues in the Chartered Institute of Marketing about, really, can we try doing something different? But that's not particularly well received. But hey ho. So Eden Carers, fascinating. I've been around the third sector for many, many years, and I remember when I was a business advisor working with a number of third sector organisations. And I have to say, when I first started working with them, I didn't understand them. They kind of blew my brain a little bit, because very, very passionate people who kind of just, the business bit was just not there. That very few of them had that combination of passion and commercial acumen, yeah?
Yeah. And that's actually important, isn't it, to have those two things? Because you can have a great idea, but if you can't push it through, it just stays a great idea, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and you don't need that ability to exist in one person. It's the ability of the individual to recognise they might not have it, so they need to hook up with others that do. And it's that, that's when you get a good set of trustees, or a good board of a company, or whatever it is, or a good set of governors working, because they recognise that nobody's got all those strengths together.
Definitely.
So that I found that fascinating, and they used to frustrate the hell out of me, and I think I used to frustrate the hell out of them, because I just didn't understand it. But eventually, I kind of got to grips with some of what they were doing. And again, back in the days when there was lots of public money swilling about, so to speak, there was lots of support for third sector organisations, and Cumbria was awash with third sector organisations. In fact, Cumbria's public sector, to a large degree, survives on the goodwill of people and the third sector, more so than other places.
And do you think that's the thing, because it's a very rural community? Do you think that is what happens in rural communities?
Yeah, I think there's rurality. Again, that's a fascinating topic for another day. But rurality.
We just have to have you back on, Tom. We've got quite a few already.
Let's wait for the feedback first, shall we? But rurality it's like if you think of rural areas as being the canary in the cage, so they amplify things. The way I describe it best is that you see where the jam is getting the thinnest very quickly in a rural area. Yeah. So if you say, let me bring this to life with a good example for you. So when I worked in the NHS, the trust that I worked for delivered community and mental health services. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what that means is that the staff who delivered across what is England's most sparsely populated county, they spent 7 million miles a year in their cars.
Wow.
Yeah. So we did the math. I'm a big believer that improvement begins with understanding, and I know it's a trite phrase, but that's, if you're going to say, right, how do we get time back? How do we optimize our resources? Let's find out what they're doing now. So we did this piece of incredibly boring work, found out that they were doing 7 million miles a year in the course of their duties. That didn't include commuting to work, by the way. That was that was in the course of their days. So this is community nurses going out into the community visiting patients. This is community mental health teams, etc. This is people travelling from meetings to Barrow-in-Furness, from Carlisle and vice versa, and going across the county. So then you compare that with an area which we found a comparator area, not a perfect one, but it was Doncaster and Rotherham. And the reason we picked them was that when you combined them, they had a similar population, yeah?
Okay.
But in terms of their geographical spread, it was a fraction, yeah? And they were doing less than 1 million miles a year. So straight away, you've got that instant penalty of time. Your resources are spread thinly in a rural area, because you're not being allowed extra resources because you are rural. In fact, many people think that rural areas need less resources because, of course, they're not suffering, are they? But it's actually a lot of that, deprivation is hidden. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of poverty in rural areas, which you simply don't see, a lot of isolation. And the reason I think that you don't hear as much about it as you might do, and again, this is a sweeping statement, is that there's a kind of a stoic self-reliance in rural areas like Cumbria. These are essentially former or current farming communities where you kind of just crack on. Yeah.
Yes.
And rural areas, whether it's adult social care, whether it's caring services, whether it's community mental health services, etc., 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 the jam gets spread very thinly, very quickly. So when you see cuts nationally, proportionately, the impact they have on a rural area is bigger.
Yes.
And that sense of self-reliance in a rural area then makes people start to think, right, what can we do about this? How do we address this? So that you naturally get this kind of, the gap gets filled, if you like.
Yeah.
And
by the third sector, by people and their goodwill, yeah?
Sometimes just by volunteers, just by people getting stuck in and doing something. So a great example. So I'll blow my wife's trumpet very briefly, but, during this current pandemic, she's shopping for a number of elderly people who are self-isolating.
Yeah.
She hasn't rung the public sector helpline to get advice on how to do that. Yeah. Just we know the neighbours.
Yeah.
Do it. Yeah. So that's fine. And the landline has become like a bit of a sort of an old person's helpline, if you like, where the phone regularly rings and a message gets left to say, well, when you get my shopping this week, can you remember this or can you remember that? And it's fine, it's great. So the gap gets filled. What that also means, though, is that the failures don't get identified. Yeah, because nobody's waving their hand in the air going, hey, this is not working over here. Because actually, you fill the gap and you make it work. So everybody thinks, well, that's fine. And that's what I mean by the public sector actually survives on the goodwill of what everybody's doing anyway to fill the gaps. Does that make sense?
It does, and that really makes sense. I don't know about you, David. David looks as though he's frozen. He'll come back. Oh, he's here. That really does make sense, because that then means that when we look back at this and see what we need, are we going to widen those questions to people such as your wife? How are we going to collate that information to understand what needs to be put in place if, because of those lack of services, we don't have the correct information? Because all they're going to look at is what's on the page. They're not going to look at what happened outside of that page, are they? So those figures aren't going to be true. And I'm a little bit antsy this week. I don't want the government to be patting themselves on the back for information that they haven't got. The only way that we can change this is to go in that systems thinking, isn't it? And look outside what the system has, and look outside to see what the system's done. Sorry, I'm ranty again. I'm on it this week. I apologise, but I think it needs to be said. Say, David.
Yeah, as you probably gathered, this connection's not brilliant. It comes and goes, but yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the systems thinking bit, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you then start to ask the question, what stops people from doing those things, and how are communities equipped to do or not do them? So the fact that my wife can do that is because that she has time available to do it, because we're both of a certain age where there are less financial pressures on us, and also as people we're not materially driven. So we're not, I'm not interested in working a 70-hour week to get a BMW on the drive. Firstly, I don't have a drive, and and if I parked it outside where it would probably get scratched anyway, so who cares? But all those factors come into play, don't they? And when you've created this, and I think it's this whole pandemic is, for me, I mean, I guess we'll be learning lessons from this for years to come, and whether we ever get back to, and whatever normal did look like and whatever it will look like, who knows? But that opportunity to step back and look and see what we're doing, because everyone is now running so quickly on the hamster wheel of global productivity, aren't they?
Yes.
That I can't remember who. You guys will know this better than me, but it was somebody famous and intelligent who said, that the unexamined life was not worth living. Yeah.
David, who said that?
The unexamined life is not worth living.
Yeah, I know the statement. I can't think who said it.
Yeah, me too.
It was one of the Socrates or Plato kind of.
It'll come to me in a minute. Yeah.
One of those clever Greek dudes.
Very clever Greek dudes.
And if you were to say that to the average person in the street who's running hard just to pay the bills, to keep the mortgage going, and laughing at you when you say, "Are you saving for a pension?" Because where's that coming from? And then thinking about the university fees the kids are going to come out of school with and all the rest of that, and it's just like,
yeah, my daughter's got 70,000 to date, I think, or is it 60? Oh, what's 10,000?
Yeah, well, quite, yeah, it's just the world has changed so much, hasn't it? And it's interesting. I remember reading a book by a guy called Alvin Toffler, who you guys might have come across. Fabulous book, actually. He makes the point that what you'll do in a society whereby people are running so quickly just to maintain their economic well-being, it will become an unquestioning society, because we won't have that space to think.
Literally makes me want to cry, actually, if I'm honest.
Yeah, we just kind of, and there's a lot of truth in what he's saying. You kind of recognise that. Now he wrote about that. I'm guessing it must have been about 50 years ago. But by the way, he's certainly worth a Google. He was he was the first of the futurists, the futurologists, very massively revered in the States and Japan for some reason. But his writing is incredibly good. So sorry, yeah. So Eden Carers, there we are. That's just the weather getting angsty outside. What we are is, as Eden Carers, we're one of 5 carers organisations within Cumbria, yeah?
Yeah.
So, and we're typical in many respects of many third sector organisations, in that we were set up with a memorandum and articles of association, which gave us a purpose to serve the area of Eden, yeah? As likely, you know, West Cumbria Carers, so we're in a collaboration with them, South Lakes Carers, the name, you know, that speaks for itself, doesn't it? Furness Carers and Carlisle Carers. And it's interesting because we're actually going through a real life experience now, which brings to life some of what I'm talking about in terms of those, sorry, what I was saying to you in the introduction earlier about the commercial bit and the passion bit, yeah?
Yes.
So the third sector is, much of the third sector has been at the crossroads for a long time, and that's not changing. In Cumbria, what we have, as every other area, is a drive to reduce costs and to deliver more for less. And this is all common language, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Commissioners want you to do more, and there's less money available to do it, and so it goes on. And it's fascinating, actually, when you speak to people within both social services and the health sector about what they think the third sector is. For some people, there's a good understanding, but for others, there's just this idea that there's this undiscovered wonderful thing out there called the third sector, and they can throw all their excess capacity at it. Won't that be a great idea?
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, there's been a lot of sort of unicorn and rainbows thinking around that, in terms of, hey, the third sector will pick up the slack. Well,
we love unicorns on this chat, don't we, David? We're big advocates of unicorns. They often come sailing by in the conversation. So I'm glad you brought your own unicorn with you, Tom.
I've been in many meetings where there are plenty of them. And it's interesting that the third sector is facing great challenges of its own. So what is, and this is a question I constantly ask myself in the role of trustee and chair for Eden Carers. What's my role here? What value am I adding? Yeah.
What are you adding? What is your role?
Different thinking. Because I think that's the purpose I kind of identify, because I have great respect for the other business people that sit around that table, and many of them are much more experienced in the worlds of business than I am, certainly in the worlds of management. But if I just sit at that table and add the same thing they're adding, then actually we're no further forward. And I have this belief that if you're not afraid of throwing concepts in the air, yeah, then you've absolutely nothing to lose. If somebody pricks the concept, let's call it that concept of balloon, if somebody pricks the concept and find out that there's nothing in it, then everybody's won.
Yeah.
Because we're all wiser.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if actually you throw the concept in the air and people try to prick it and it stands the test, then everybody's wiser.
Yeah.
We're all, so I try to, when I say challenge is a strong word, but again, somebody far cleverer than me once said that fighting was the avoidance of conflict. that actually you need, there has to be that element of challenge there, doesn't there?
Yeah.
To say, hang on, have we got this right? And let's be comfortable with each other challenging each other's views. What you've got is you've got a whole lot of dynamics though going into the third sector, which I think are often misunderstood. And one of them is the role of volunteer trustees. Yeah. And again, I came across this in NHS trusts where they were turning over hundreds of millions of pounds and kept insisting that the views of their governors was important, but actually they did everything they could to ignore the views of their governors because they simply didn't trust part-timers, volunteers, yeah, to make significant decisions about strategy involving such significant sums, etc., etc.
But surely that's how organisations, how communities are formed by so many differing people and so many differing views.
Well, it's a really interesting point because I think you have to ask the question, who gets attracted to these roles?
Right.
So when I first became a school governor, I was flattered.
Okay.
Oh, my local councillor thinks I'm good enough to be a school governor. Fabulous, great. I've arrived. I'm a respected citizen.
Yes, I mean that is pure psychology, isn't it, David?
And And then you think, hang on a second, you know, the reality starts to kick in, you know, and you have your first spat with the head, you know, because the head's trying to get you to write a letter to the staff telling them where not to park, but the head's ignoring your advice on bullying. And you realise actually what the head is now doing is very cleverly using the governors to do the things that will make them look unfavourable, yeah. Yeah, so the governors wrote you that letter on where to park, wasn't me. You know, those pesky pedantic governors, you know, yeah. Oh, I'm trying to keep them in line for you. I'm trying to keep them off your back, yeah. But when we actually tried to raise issues with the head about, you know, what we should be teaching kids in school and the fact that there was a bullying problem, no response, nothing. So public sector institutions who say they want community engagement through their governors are actually managing those governors very carefully. And they can do that really quite easily because a lot of those governors are attracted by the status of being a governor. I'm a trustee of this, I'm a governor of that.
Yes.
But really, are you adding any value? And when I looked around, and I resigned as a school governor after 8 years because I just couldn't take it any longer, I looked around and realised there was that role of critical friend. Yeah. There was absolutely no criticism in that room, you know. People just wanted to come, to turn up, to sign off them. You know, we'd spend 30 minutes reading through the previous minutes of the last meeting, as if somehow we were achieving something, you know, and the minutes would be approved, and it was this grand, oh, we've approved the minutes, isn't that, you know, and I'm thinking, my goodness me, I'm giving up my time for this, you know. Yeah. You know, I'd rather sort of smack myself around the head with a pan than be in this room, you know, and I wouldn't have had to pay the petrol to get there, you know, I just have to walk through to the kitchen to do that.
Yeah.
So you've got all these dynamics going on, and third sector organisations attract trustees, some of whom are attracted by status.
Of course.
That's fine. But I think often there's this confusion between, so when the head was challenged, so just to bring this to life, when the head was challenged in my previous role as a school governor, there was this kind of sense of, oh, I'm not used to this. Well, that's governors challenging. They're not supposed to do that, are they? You know. So it's been an interesting journey for me as a trustee of a third sector organisation. I think that sometimes when you challenge, it's handled much more diplomatically, but still ignored.
Yeah.
So that, you know, there's you'll get those sort of that sort of low hum of agreement around the room about, yes, we should be looking at that, shouldn't we? Yes, we should be looking at strategy. We should be looking at what's coming over the horizon. We should be looking at competitive threats. We should be looking at other parts of the country. We should be talking to other carers organisations about how we can use technology in a rural area. Da 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 da. The list goes on. Do we do it? Hey, you know, and part of that is we don't have the time. So because the third sector is essentially governed by volunteers. There are some very good ones, don't get me wrong, but actually a lot of them just don't have the time because we get back to that treadmill of life, don't we? And everybody's running on that hamster wheel. So when you say to them, are you thinking deeply about your role as a trustee of a third sector organisation? They kind of go, well, I'd probably not. No, really. I turn up to the meetings. I reply to my emails. I pass the minutes of the previous meeting. I support the motions I think I should support. And I add, don't get me wrong, we have some great experts. I'm fortunate, you know, we've got legal and HR experts in the room of Eden Carers, and that's a fabulous bonus.
Yeah.
They're very good at what they do. Sometimes the strategy piece, when we talk strategy, it's as if we're straying into an area that we shouldn't. But are you okay, by the way, with me just carrying on with this?
Yeah, because I don't know about you, David, I'm just literally finding this.
I'm engrossed, to be honest.
Yeah, please roll, Tom. I mean, can I just add that there's a lovely title that somebody threw at me, I don't know, about 6 months ago. You're a disruptor. I said, oh. And they said, but that's a good thing. And I said, well, can I say I'm an unintentional disruptor? Because it's actually just part of my nature. And I think, David, that you are a wonderful disruptor. And Tom, I am hearing that you are a disruptor. And I think that disruptors are needed in society because it is about, otherwise everything just goes along and sits in its status quo, whereas you'll just go in and go, boom, I'm going to say this, I'm going to throw this in. And I like the fact that you talk about that When that balloon pops, everybody gets a win. When that balloon, everybody's pressing it together, everybody gets a win. Because how can we change systems if we don't disrupt it in the first place, to see whether or not it's working, or what's working well and what could be done better? Is that what I'm hearing you're saying?
Pretty much, because if the concept gets pricked, then everybody becomes wiser because they understand why it wouldn't work. And if the concept holds up, again, everybody buys into the fact that the reasons why it will hold up. So by floating it, and you get those opportunities to improve it as well. So, you know, there's this, but you need people who get that, if that makes sense. You need people who are prepared to contribute to that, to help it, so the concept can start as something and grow, and it can become stronger. I mean, I think life is full of frustrations, isn't it? It's full of good things as well, don't get me wrong, but certainly, I guess the thing that, I have a little chip on my shoulder, I'll be honest about that.
I hadn't noticed. Had you noticed, David?
No, not at all.
Probably quite big, it's probably on both shoulders, but I
have little shiny gems on mine.
So I get, there's something, isn't there, about, I'm terrible for quotes. I quote people far too much, but I guess I won't say it's a lazy way of showing ideas and verbalizing concepts, but for me, if you quote somebody that's obviously cleverer than you, I think that gives you credibility, in the sense that it's not Tom Bell saying, you know, it's Socrates saying it. So let's, and I'm not saying you can't argue with Socrates, but I'm saying it's kind of, I think
Socrates wanted you to argue with him. I think that was the whole point of Socrates.
Probably right, yeah.
We've just learnt to bow down to it because of this educational system of how we're meant to do that. Yet in actual fact, we should be absolutely on the level. So please contradict Socrates. I'm going to, you know, kind of bring him in the room and say, is that okay? I think he says yes. Greeks, I used to live in Greece. You know, these are a fabulous, passionate, argumentative nation. And it's just amazing.
Well, yeah, I love Greece, and we've got friends in Greece, and I love talking politics with them when we go there. And what amazes my father and mother-in-law, who I love to bits, by the way, what amazes them is how switched on the Greeks are to their politics.
Totally.
And I think that's great, you know, that they take an interest, you know. And we often talk about that guy, what's he called? Yanis Varoufakis. Yeah. He's this sort of very disruptive politician. Who, fabulous.
He's a disruptor.
Can you hear the rain, by the way, or not?
No, but don't send it down over to Lancashire. And David certainly doesn't want it down Staffordshire, isn't it, David?
Yeah.
We're kind of the West, aren't we? We're kind of going like this today.
Yeah, it's absolutely hammering down. And I watered the sunflowers this morning, so that was a total waste of time, but not to worry. So I guess the thing is, the chips I have on my shoulder I call them working class chips. Might be unfashionable, not too bothered. Because I've sat in rooms, right, with, well, let's just go for it. Let's just say I've sat in rooms full of large ladies from public health and adult social care and community nursing, right, from the upper strata of management, who sit with a pile of cakes on a plate and a table in the middle of them, right, and want to come up with strategies about how to help people in deprived communities eat better, yeah? And I just kind of look at, and I think, you've just never been there, have you? You're trying to solve problems you have utterly no understanding of. And I've been homeless, and I've sat in rooms full of people who attempt to identify with the homeless and come up with solutions. And they attempt to identify with people who've experienced poverty. And these are people who've never been short of anything, you know. And you just think, come on, you're talking absolute crap here. You have no idea about what you're dealing with. We kind of follow that, aren't we? We've got lots of people, you know. It's you know, I'm a devout atheist, but the Bible is full of good phrases. And one of them is that, you know, that we get a lot of counsel without wisdom, don't we? And we're obviously seeing that now, you know, in politics, and we won't go into that one. But there is so much policy that is just not evidence-based. let's not go there.
There is that sense, though, isn't there? And certainly, David, you know, and thereby the grace of the universe go I, you know, that sense of, well, I will project what I am struggling with and fix it for somebody else. I will say and put my hand up that when I first went into the helping profession area, I was out fixing because I wasn't fixing myself. And I'm a bit of a lover of a guy called Dr. Gabor Mate, as David will verify. And he absolutely really takes this down the middle of the helping professions. Stop doing your bloody studies, academics, and in actual fact, go back and look at yourself and sort yourself, and then come through. So for somebody with me, and obviously you've got this massive lived experience as well, and David and I often share our lived experience so that people watching it can understand what we're on about and can relate to it. And that's one of the things that people say about this. It's just really relatable. I can really relate to that, because studies are great, and I don't knock them, and they are useful, and they can guide us and they can support us. But that experiential lived experience and that recognition within ourselves of why we behave as we do and what needs changing, I think it's paramount, and I think we need a lot more of it. And certainly I think in the therapy sector, we really do need to take time to reflect on ourselves, to think, where am I coming from this? Because otherwise you get in the way in the therapy because you're not addressing yourself. What do you think, David? Because that's a little bit like the cake on the plate, isn't it? That you're not addressing yourself before you address how, you know, the nation is eating. David, I've been a bit disrupty there.
No, I just have problems from time to time coming in and out. But yeah. Disruption, to my mind, is it's a need, it's a must. You know, Tom referred back to what's normal going to be like, and unless we disrupt, well, this has been a massive disruption, unless that's carried forward and we continue disrupting, ask questions, and don't sit there accepting everything. And it links into the fact that, you know, let's get lived experience or unexamined lives, you know, are where we've been at for a long time. And we talked about this yesterday as well. It's about, like, where are these groups of people that want to do something, and how can they come together and get together to examine this stuff and ask the questions and jump up and down, which, you know, we find lacking, but this might be the catalyst that gets people moving.
Do you think it will be in your Eden carers, Tom? Do you think that this pandemic will change the way that you as an organisation, because you're third sector, you've got those volunteers, etc., etc. So do you think that this can galvanise you to change the approach? I mean, never mind the role of a carer. I mean, I think that's another show for us, isn't it? That's another chat, Tom. We literally kind of think I need you back every week at the moment. Because do you think that this can help you as an organisation change to meet the need in a different way?
Yes.
Can you utilise it? Can you? I mean, you clearly are a disruptor. Are you personally going to go in and go, hang on a cherry picking minute? This is what we have all lived this. This is a pandemic. We have all lived it. So I wonder if, in that sense of all living something, if that then does make that change for change.
I think it does make a case for change, doesn't it? And I think, yes, so if we just split very briefly into two bits, so cultural and technical, yeah. So the technical bit of how Eden Carers does what it does, I think there'll be a good case for change there, yeah. As much as I remember trying to drive initiatives around the use of technology, yeah, to address the isolation of carers in remote areas, yeah, and that not being received well, because that's not the way we do things, you know, and that's okay. It's a little bit of antiquated thinking, I think, you know, because some of these people that we're dealing with, again, you know, they're using FaceTime, yeah, and why can't we use that to interact with them and help them to create groups and self-sustain and all those other bits? But I think people can sometimes see tech as a threat, and I get that. But if we're putting the needs of the carers first, then we should be thinking about how we can use technology. Culturally, will it make us think differently? Probably. And I think the most challenging question to come out of this will be, when we couldn't do what we did, did people miss us? Because if they didn't, then that would be quite, I mean, I guess it's a tough question to ask yourself.
It's a brilliant question.
But yeah, you know, what is or isn't happening because of what we're doing? And we've got to be really honest about that, haven't we? And if people didn't notice the fact that we weren't there, then we need to start thinking a bit differently about that. So I think for us, going back, there will be a piece of work to be done about saying, right, what did we, you know, let's have a wash-up session, if you like, Let's actually go and survey.
I think it comes back to the fact that the unicorn's not supposed to have a voice, is it?
Oh
gosh, well, yeah. What accent would it have? I'm not sure. But yeah,
brilliant, David.
West Cumbrian unicorn. So I think but also it will. The real life example I was going to tell you about earlier. So having moved from a personal point of view, from being motivated to get into public service, if we call it that, volunteering through status, now do it because I'm trying to add value and because I understand the third sector, and I've been around the third sector now for, 18, 20 years. So sort of have developed a decent understanding of it. We have an organisation in the north of the county called Carlisle Carers, which was formerly one of the 5 caring alliance. We used, 5 caring bodies in the Cumbria Alliance, And again, words like alliance and partnership. I have to say, partnership is probably the most abused phrase of the last 30 years. Everybody works in partnership, don't they?
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. The suppression of loathing in pursuit of mutually beneficial goals, isn't it? Something like that.
Love this guy. He is coming back.
but I was going to, so when I sit as in my role, when I sit and I challenge and I say, right, okay, can we survive as Eden Carers? Will we be here in 3 years' time? Because the passion is okay, and we've got reserves. We've got reserves in the bank, and aren't we fortunate? But that's the look of the universe. Some of that, don't get me wrong, some of it's good management. But some of it's also the fact that, we had some benefactors who, when they passed away, gifted significant sums to the organisation, and that's brilliant. And that's a testimony to the good work that's done. I'm not, not critical of that at all. But they'd have been just as grateful if they left nothing, if they had nothing to leave. So we've been fortunate there. So do we start to look in the rearview mirror and realise that large national organisations are gunning for small contracts like ours, whenever they come up? Because the model of the large organisations is we grab some, we lose some. That's the financial model, but we keep growing at a reasonable percentage. We know we're going to lose. There's a bit of attrition there, so we lose 1 or 2 contracts here and there. But actually, if we're grabbing more than we're losing, then we're throwing more in the top of the bucket than we're losing at the bottom. That's fine. We can live with that, and that's their financial model. Now, those organisations often get accused of leaving their compassion behind because they've become very commercial. They understand what commissioners want, and they've become brilliant at missing. I'll try to make this the last whiz phrase that I throw in there. They've become wizards at hitting the target and missing the point. So they give the commissioners exactly what the commissioners want, and commissioners love them for that. Because if you're a commissioner, that's what you want. With respect to commissioners, they're not actually on the front line. They are removed from the difference that's made, yeah?
Yeah.
So if an organisation says to them, we're making this difference, we're hitting the numbers you want, we're giving you value for the funding that you're giving us, then the commissioner ticks the box and says, well, you're welcome back next time. For those organisations that, like us, that say, well, we know the local area and we're passionate, the response to that, frankly, is, so what?
Mm.
You know, because that doesn't show up on my spreadsheet.
Mm.
So if I've got this national organisation banging on the door, telling me they can do it for less, and they, you know, and do the stuff, and they've got the critical mass to start thinking about implementing the technology, then why shouldn't I listen to them? Because you guys have been sat here for years, just taking the cash and never changing the way you do what you do. So as passionate as you are, as dedicated as you are, if you were in the private sector, you'd have gone bust by now because somebody would have come in and taken your customers, yeah?
Yeah.
Period. They would have, yeah?
Yeah.
But those kind of challenging messages, they're really difficult to float, you know, because essentially, so if you get the 5 chief executives of the Cumbria Carers organisation sat in a room, yeah, and you say, right, do we all understand that we need to work more closely together? Nods, everybody nods, that's great. Right, do we all understand that we need to achieve some economies of scale? Yeah, that's great. Do we understand that we need to get consistency about the way we work, so we have a model of what good looks like, yeah? That we can hold up to commissioners and we can hold up to the world and we can say, we are good at this, we understand our areas. They'll go, yeah, that's right. Right, okay, so critical mass, economies of scale, which one of your chief executives is going to retire? You know, who's going to put their hand in the air?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're saying, isn't it? You're saying, we don't need 5 chief executives of carers organisations in Cumbria.
Yeah.
We don't need it. Nobody else running an organisation in Cumbria would split it into 5 patches and then stick 5 chief execs in place, yeah?
Mm.
Now, of course, somebody from West Cumbria might say, well, West Cumbria is unique. We've got things here going on that you wouldn't understand, therefore we need somebody with local perspective. That's fine. But, you know, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, they're still delivering into Barrow-in-Furness and West Cumbria because they can give people what they want when they want it.
Yeah.
But Jeff
and
doesn't
make him a trillionaire, apparently.
Absolutely. And Jeff doesn't need a chief executive in West Cumbria to help him, to keep him informed about the needs of local people. Because his algorithm is telling him everything he needs to know about what they want, when they want it, their purchasing patterns, da-da-da-da-da. So we might think that's terribly impersonal, but actually it's quite cute and quite clever. And you and I know that when we sign on to Amazon and it says, hi Aneesh, hi David, this is what you might like based on your previous purchases. You know, basically it's saying to you, I know how you tick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
apparently they know your age as well, and they sent me, you know, I'm a woman of an age, a certain age, and they keep sending me other things through, and I've become quite indignant actually and quite pissed off with it.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'll share that. Lived experience of an algorithm.
I mean, I get things through from Saga, you know, all the time, offering me holidays with old people. That's fine, you know. I'm sure that you know.
I'm not going to ask what you get through, David.
Mainly plans for funerals. You know.
Moving on.
So how do you sell the idea to the fellow trustees and the chief executive of a third sector organisation that we need to have a really good long look at ourselves, and either, here's where it becomes a little bit bastardy, yeah?
Okay.
Because behind closed doors, and I guess this isn't behind closed doors, so I perhaps shouldn't give too much away, but do you say, right, actually, if we're not going to lose any chief executives, we need to become better than the people in this coalition. So those partners that we call, that when we meet and shake their hands and say, oh, hello, partner, behind the scenes, should we be working to supersede them? Do we want to bid for those contracts? And when you float an idea like that amongst a bunch of caring people, because the third sector attracts caring people, you're seen as a bit of a bastard.
And it's a contradiction in terms in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, we can't. Well, that's because that's just going to take us in the direction of those national companies, those heartless buggers, you know, that want to come in and take business and just hit the targets and deliver the numbers and take the money. But actually, that's a conversation that you need to have, isn't it? Because what you've got to think of these organisations like businesses, because unless they actually can work like a business, then there's nothing there left for them to deliver.
Mm.
And so you might say, well, actually, what does Eden Carers become in the future? Does Eden Carers become Eden and Carlisle Carers, or does Eden Carers become Eden and West Cumbria Carers, or does it become North Cumbria Carers? Does it, these are thorny questions, aren't they? And again, you can see when I float these ideas around the trustees, there are all those kind of grunts and nods of approval that you'll get about the concept and the fact that we should think about it, but that almost becomes a surrogate for doing it.
Mm.
Do you remember when we discussed that, Tom? Well, yeah, I remember when we discussed it, but we didn't do anything about it, did we?
Yeah.
Well, no, but we discussed it.
Yeah.
Well, really, is that? And again, because I like the fact that I've got. I mean, I would say this, wouldn't I? I like the fact that I've got private sector experience. Because I worked in sales for many years, and the idea that you could satisfy your sales director by talking rather than producing, that's not going to work.
Mm.
I've knocked on 100 doors this month. Well, so what?
Yeah, what's your result at the end of it?
Yeah. What have we shifted? How much money have we made? And that's, again, that's the bastardy end of the scale.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle is a balance. But we are. I think we're in really challenging times.
I think that we are. I think we are in challenging times. I think this pandemic has brought up a lot of the sludge has now come to the surface, and that sludge needs to be cleared. I mean, that's a reflection, isn't it, out on the sludge of the world at the moment because of climate change. I'm not going to go into it. Next week we've got to talk about sustainability and climate change. But I think that today, Tom, I don't know about you, David, because I'm just, aware of time, but I literally could have sat here for the rest of the day and listened to you, Tom. I don't know if you're going to be doing seminars, but there's something that tells me that you should. There's something that tells me that the way that you impart your wisdom, and it is wisdom, and your knowledge with that lovely humour. And I love your working class chippiness, because it makes change. We don't always have to be smooth. I think that those bumps that we have can really impact, and I literally have sat here and thought, gee, I need to watch this so many times. David, I know that you often remark that these conversations, we don't know where they're going, and we never do, but they always give us something else to move on with. So I don't know, David, have you got something to add before we close today's discussion? And I don't want to close this discussion. I want this to stay open.
I'm of the same view. I am ponderful, this word that we've invented. But I do usually, I guess I have a lot more to say, but Tom, I was just fascinated on the topic. And I'm fascinated by the work that you do, and just sitting there and listening, it's been so insightful. So I thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Normally I'm very quiet. Normally I'm very chatty, but for me, David, would we say I've been quiet today? I've just been literally like sat at you like.
Yeah,
Tom,
we both have. Yeah, we both have.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, definitely. Please come back, Tom. Don't you agree, David?
Yes.
Well, if you'll have me, that'd be great. So
absolutely, we will. And you know what? Thank you. Genuinely, thank you for opening up that discussion in those questions, and also your vulnerability and your real honesty about what promotes you to do what you have done in the past, and what the questions that you're prepared to ask. We need more disruptors at this moment in time. They need to be out there.
Thank you.
So goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we're getting Tom back.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thank you, Aneesh.
Pleasure to meet you, Tom. Pleasure.
Cheers. Do I just press the leave?
I will stop, and we're out, and thank you.